About 8 years ago, I went through a phase where loneliness took a strong hold on me. Desperation might be the right term. To give you a bit of context, I'd been in a few serious relationships over my life, but hitting 32 came with a crushing wave of sadness. The guy I thought would be my lifelong partner decided he wasn't ready for the next step, and we parted ways. This was after being together for 5 years, mind you. While he claimed it was about commitment issues, I'm fairly certain he just wanted to date someone else. It was a bitter pill to swallow, but I had no choice but to accept it and move forward. He's not the focus of this story though, so apologies for the detour. Shortly after that breakup and hitting 32 a couple of months later, I found myself in a pretty deep slump. I was in that I need someone now mindset, so I quickly set up a profile on one of those dating websites that were popular back in 2013. I can't recall which one exactly, maybe OkCupid or something similar. It was a bit of a mess, honestly, matching me with people who were nothing like me. Nothing quite like reading a suggested bio that's the complete opposite of who you are. When you see no tall women and no women who enjoy Harry Potter, and my profile clearly states that I'm taller than average and a massive Potterhead, it feels like a bad joke. So after wading through the nonsense, matching with a few guys, and messaging a handful without much hope, I finally came across a guy named Jake. Jake was everything I was looking for in terms of looks, and his interests matched mine perfectly. He had long black hair, seemed taller than me, which was a bonus but not a must-stand. All his photos had him sporting pop culture tees that hinted at shared interests. I marked him as someone I liked, hoping he'd do the same, and to my delight, he did. I shot him a DM, starting with something cheesy like, "Your hair is stunning. I wish mine could be as sleek and straight as yours." I know it sounds silly, but I genuinely was a bit envious. He replied almost instantly with a joke about how he made a pact with the devil for his hair. His quirky humor was one of the things that drew me to him, and I was thrilled to get to know him. I might have been desperate, but there was something about Jake that felt right, like he could be the one I'd been searching for. And maybe we had a future together. Thinking this way after just a few conversations might not be the healthiest, but there was really something special about him. We ended up chatting on the phone a few times, and I found myself liking him even more. He had a wonderful singing voice and mentioned he used to be in a local band that had a bit of a following but never made it big. He also told me his last job was at a pet clinic where he would keep animals company if they had to stay overnight or needed special care beyond medical treatment. The more he shared, the more I adored him. Yet a nagging question lingered in my mind. Why was he single? He was attractive, talented, funny, and loved animals. It didn't add up that no one had snatched him up already. I decided to ask him about it, and he said it was complicated. That response worried me, so I pressed for more details. He eventually revealed that he'd been married, but things went south recently, so he was now single. That made sense. He had been married, it ended badly, and now he was looking for someone new, much like me. We shared stories about our past relationships, although he was a bit evasive about his. I figured it was still fresh for him, and he didn't want to dive into it. I respected that. It was nice to vent about my own frustrations, and he was a great listener. He helped me see things from a different perspective. Then the big day came. We agreed to meet for coffee on a Saturday morning at a nearby cafe. I arrived, and he was already there, sitting in the back, waiting for me. It felt really good to see him in person. He looked just like his photos. He had the same personality. He was the same funny and entertaining guy that I had come to know over these past couple of weeks. This was actually a huge relief because I was worried that I was going to get catfished. We enjoyed our coffee and companionship for a few hours, and then I had mentioned that it was getting to be midday and that I should probably be getting home at some point, but I would absolutely love to meet up again and maybe have dinner or something. This is when he mentioned to me that he'd had a great time as well. Then he kind of shyly looked down at the floor like something was wrong. I asked if he was okay, and he looked up and mentioned that he needed to ask me a favor. I said, of course, not really thinking about what the favor could be, but he then mentioned that he actually needed me to give him a ride somewhere if I could. I realized that he was already there when I got in, so I hadn't seen him pull up, and he actually seemed rather embarrassed at this request, which was almost cute. At this point, I felt comfortable enough with him that having him in my car, driving him a few blocks or miles to his apartment, it really wasn't that big of a deal. Plus, I was honestly thinking this could be a long-term thing if it kept up like it had, so I was more than willing to do so. I told him that was fine and just kind of mentioned that I didn't know that he didn't have a car and told him that he didn't need to be embarrassed about it. He thanked me and we headed out to my car and we went to get him home. As we were driving and he was pointing out where to turn, he started telling me more about his past and how things had been really rough recently. I asked if the divorce had been a bad one, and he then dropped a bombshell. He mentioned that he and his wife actually hadn't gotten divorced. This killed me inside, and it kind of made things make more sense. He wasn't actually divorced, he was still married. Sure, they could have been separated, but if he wasn't divorced, then it was likely that they could get back together or try to fix things, and then there would be no room for myself in Jake's life. I kind of shut down a bit after this, and I just listened to him tell me about how bad things were between him and his wife, not really paying attention to where he was telling me to go. Then he had me turn one more time a turn into the parking lot of a police station. I parked and just kind of looked around, confused. I asked why we were at the police station, and it was then that he went really quiet and just sort of looked at the building and away from me. This whole situation was really weird, and I was honestly starting to feel a bit freaked out. Then Jake looked over at me and said he really enjoyed our short time together, adding that I was a wonderful woman and that I would definitely find someone. He then said he was about to go into the station and confess to something really, really bad and that he was probably going to prison for the rest of his life. He said if things had been different, he would have loved to spend more time with me. I asked him what he had done and what he was talking about, and he just sighed and said it was an accident, that he never meant to hurt anyone. Then he pushed my door open and walked into the building. I just sat there, watching him walk into the station with his head held high and stop at the front desk. I watched the whole thing unfold from the parking lot, watched him talk to the desk clerk, watched an officer approach him cautiously, and then watched as the officer put him in handcuffs and led him away. A few minutes later, another officer came out to my car and spoke with me. He asked if I knew the man I had just dropped off, how I knew him, and if I knew what had happened. I told him we had met a couple of weeks ago and that this was our first date. I was pretty much interrogated right there in the parking lot about Jake, and I told the officer everything I knew. He told me Jake had just walked in and confessed to killing his wife. I was stunned. I thought he was divorced. After more talking, they gave me a card, took my information, and then let me leave. It became clear to me how Jake had a wife past tense but wasn't divorced. And then it hit me. I had had coffee with a murderer and even drove him to the station to turn himself in. I really don't know if our date was just a way for him to get free coffee and a ride to the station, or if he was genuinely interested in me. But either way, it was the most terrifying thing that has ever happened to me. Not because he was a creep to me, but because he was perfectly normal the whole time we spoke. During our date, this man was a murderer, but he seemed like a calm, collected guy. Just a regular person. This was the only time I ever went on a date with someone I met online, and I shut down my account after that. Tonight I broke up with my boyfriend because he kept joking about murdering me. During our first few weeks of dating, he joked too much for comfort that he was going to murder and dismember me and dispose of my body. Maybe out of context, I'm being dramatic. He's very sarcastic and has dark humor. But to me, it wasn't funny and caused me anxiety because I know the statistics. I talked to him about this. I told him repeatedly, stop joking about killing me. He kept on with the jokes until I finally told him that those jokes literally scared me. He apologized and seemed to feel bad that his jokes made me scared of him. Tonight, we were over 3 hours late to meet with his brother, to play games, watch movies, and eat dinner. When I was talking to him about us being late, I noticed he sighed deeply, clenched his fist and looked down at it, as if he were making the conscious choice to not punch me. Then, as I was saying goodbye to his brother, he comes into the room and says, she should say her permanent goodbyes. I asked him what the hell. He said it was a joke. I asked, how's it funny? What's the punchline? Please explain to me how that was supposed to be funny. He couldn't answer. I didn't want to get in the car with him. I walked off, and thankfully my roommate picked me up and drove me home. He called later, and I told him I'm done. He's a good man other than for the jokes about killing me. We talked about and agreed that he wouldn't joke about killing me anymore, but then he did it again tonight and doubled down that it was just a joke and that actually I'm the problem. I started telling him again about how often women are killed by their husbands and boyfriends, and that's why the jokes bother me so much, but he interrupted me to say, "Fuck you." So I hung up and blocked him. All of this really sucks because my roommates say I should just talk it out with him and give him another chance because they can tell I really like him and he really likes me. But I already did that. I thought we were past the homicide jokes. Then he did it again tonight while he was angry with me. And it caused me this awful feeling in my gut that I needed to not get in the car with him and get away from him. I've had boyfriends and male friends in the past. None of them have ever made jokes about murdering and dismembering me, especially multiple times after I told them to stop. Have you had friends, boyfriends that make jokes like this? Where is the humor in it? What would you do in this situation? I went on a date with a girl in Lakeland, Florida, who worked for Florida Orthopedic Institute. She was a surgeon's assistant. We met at a restaurant in Lakeland, and she showed up completely drunk. During dinner, she kept asking me about any sports-related injuries I had. I told her I had an old damaged rotator cuff from 20 plus years ago, and she was basically touching me all over, telling me how much she'd love to cut me open, snip the damaged tendon, and tack it back in place. I was horrified, and she seemed completely fine with telling me how much she'd love to watch me be put under and cutting my shoulder up. Basically, it seemed like it turned her on, the idea of watching me get cut open. She ordered a bottle of wine and drank almost the entire bottle of wine by herself. I had one glass, she had the other 4, and finished the bottle. At the end of dinner, she wanted to go walk around a couple street bars that were near the restaurant. She seemed to know people everywhere, and I was embarrassed to be with her. She was so drunk, acting so strange about how much she wants to have me cut open, insisting on it, telling me to make an appointment, being extremely pushy about it. Anyways, I realized there was no way for her to drive home, and she was practically passing out on me. I offered to drive her home in her car and Uber back to the restaurant we had met during the week, so I figured she'd need her car to get to work. I drove her in her car back to her apartment, walked her up to her apartment, basically opened the door for her, locked the bottom lock, tossed her keys inside on the floor, and shut the door. As I'm walking back to the apartment parking lot, I realized my phone was at critical, less than 5%. This was back in 2017, 2018, and Uber hadn't really taken off just yet in a rural area like Lakeland. I opened up the app and realized that there was 0 drivers anywhere in Lakeland on a Wednesday at midnight. Nothing. 0 cars, 0. And I had no idea where I was even at. I'm basically standing on the side of some dark road in Lakeland as my cell phone is about to die. Finally, a car pops up about 20 minutes away, and I immediately message the driver that I have a $40 cash tip if he doesn't cancel the ride. I tell him my cell phone is about to die and that I drove a drunk person home. He texts back that he won't cancel the ride. My cell phone completely dies. It felt like an absolute eternity, but he finally arrives and picks me up and takes me back to my car. The next afternoon, she texts me asking what happened. I told her the story. She starts insisting that she remembers her and I having sex. I told her numerous times that we 100% did not have sex. She kept saying that she dreamed we had sex and that she thinks we had sex. I sent her a screenshot of me calling for the Uber ride, insisting that we didn't have sex. 0.100%, one of the creepiest dates I ever went on, one of the creepiest people I ever met. About 2 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I got out of a long-term relationship. Being that I'm the shy type, I wasn't good at asking girls out, and for some reason, it gave me crippling anxiety. I'm not sure if it was the fear of rejection or the embarrassment of my peers, but either way, dating was not my strong suit. When I met my ex, Tinder was just becoming a thing, so I never used the app. Now that I was single, I had a chance to try it for myself. I must admit, I was excited. I know a lot of my friends have had success on Tinder and various other dating platforms. I had the app for a few months and nothing exciting happened. I did meet one girl at the park, but that date lasted all of like 20 minutes. She got the classic phone call move, saying that she had gotten called into work, and then I never heard from her again. I was just about to consider the Tinder experiment a failure, and then I matched with Danielle, Danny for short. She was beautiful. I half expected that I was being played. Actually, at one point, I thought for sure that this girl was going to be a 50-year-old dude or something, but I continued to talk to her anyway. We agreed to meet at the local park in our area. The park is a beautiful place. There's a big lake in the middle and a massive series of trails that go all around the lake. We agreed to meet at 5 p.m. when we both got out of work. I showed up at 4 just because I was nervous and waited around until I got her message. A little after 5, she messaged saying that she was walking to the pavilion where all the picnic tables were. I messaged back and told her that I was heading that way as well. I was beyond happy when I walked up to the pavilion, and sitting right in front of me was Danny, the same Danny from Tinder, and not a 50-year-old man. I sat down and we talked for a while. She had this way of calming me down and telling me to not be so nervous. Whatever she was saying and doing, it worked. I was head over heels for this girl already, and I thought that I may have been doing a good job on the date since it had been a few hours, and she hadn't left yet. We decided to go for a walk on one of the trails, even though it was starting to get dark out. Ordinarily, I would have never agreed to do this, but I felt alright with Danny for some reason. I reached for her hand at one point, and I nearly melted when she allowed me to hold her hand. For the first time in a while, I felt something special. We walked for a long time until it was dark. She suggested that we should turn around and start making our way back to the cars since we had no idea how much longer this trail went for, and it was almost pitch black on the trail. The walk back was nice for a while. Danny was holding my hand and cuddling up against my arm. We weren't far from the lot when I noticed somebody standing in the walkway. I could barely see him, and if it wasn't for the faint light of the moon shining through the trees, I probably would have missed him. I stopped abruptly and asked Danny if she could see him, and she said that she could. She shouted and asked the guy if he needed anything, and the person just stood there. I was terrified, but I didn't want to seem too scared in front of Danny. I just suggested that we move and that it was probably just some fool trying to play some joke on us. She agreed, and we slowly continued walking toward the person. As they became more visible, it was becoming more scary as the figure hadn't budged an inch, and now we could clearly see that he was concealing something behind his back. When we were about 10 feet away, the man finally moved his hands from behind his back, and in his hand appeared to be a knife, but I wasn't sure. In a low and rough voice, the man said, "Turn around and put your hands above your head." I had no idea what to do. Danny, being the little spitfire that she is, started to argue with the man, and before I could even realize what was happening, she charged right into the guy, knocking him over, and she shouted for me to run. So I did. I could hear the man running after me as we made our way off the trail. We both ran to her car. She got into the passenger seat, and we drove off. I could see the man in the parking lot as we were departing from the park. Along with my car, there were 3 other cars in the parking lot, which made me think, was this guy alone, or were there more people in danger in that park? When we were a safe distance away, we decided to call the police and report what had happened. The man was long gone, and the only car in the lot when the police arrived was my vehicle. I remember having the thought at one point that Danny was setting me up, but thankfully, after her apparent heroic action, that thought was put to bed. After that horrifying interaction, we went to a late night dinner and just stayed up all night talking. It was like that event brought us together closer for some reason. In a lot of ways, I have mixed feelings about Tinder. The app almost got me killed, but I also met Danny there, and now she's my fiance. Whenever we tell people how we met, it's always fun to watch the reaction of people when we tell them that we met on Tinder and almost died on our first date. I still can't believe what she did that night and that we were able to actually get out of there unharmed. It just goes to show you that sometimes good things can come out of the bad. When I was in junior year of high school, I had my first relationship. His name was Mike. He was a senior at a different high school the next town. We met through Facebook. He texted me and we started talking from there. We started hanging out and going to each other's games. I'd go to his football games and he'd come to my softball games. We officially became boyfriend and girlfriend after a few weeks. Since we were in high school though, we didn't go on a lot of traditional dates like dinner or drinks way, we're just kids. Still, our dates usually consisted of getting burritos, going for drives, or hanging out at his place. Since my parents were always home and made it awkward in case we wanted to do anything, we usually went to his house. The best way I could describe Mike, he was a bit of a hothead. He was big for a 17-year-old. That's why he played football, but he didn't hang out with the jocks. He hung out more with the stoner crowd and the regular crowd. At least that's what he told me. I didn't go to the same school as him, so I didn't see who he was with during lunch. I also didn't really meet a lot of his friends. We mostly hung out just the two of us. Since he lived kind of far and I couldn't drive yet, it did get annoying. And truthfully, I started to develop feelings for this boy Andrew at my own school. So I felt myself losing interest in Mike. I wanted to test things out with Andrew. So one night when Mike was asking to hang out, I asked him to pick me up so we could talk. He knew right away something was off when I said that. When he picked me up, we went for a drive, and I told him that I think we should take a break. He refused to accept that I was serious and angrily demanded to know what he did. When I told him it's just that I felt the spark wasn't there anymore, he got so mad that he punched his dashboard, leaving a big indent in it. He started yelling and scaring me, so I was about to get out of the car. But he stopped me and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "No, no, no," and then asked me not to leave. He told me he was just angry, but that he'd drive me home. He put the car back in drive and started driving us. As we drove, he kept getting angrier as he asked for more details of what he did wrong. He started blowing stop signs, and that's when I realized we weren't going in the direction of my parents' house. I asked him to pull over and let me out, and he yelled, "Number." We were approaching some wooded area, and that's when I started getting really scared. I had never seen him like this before, but he was showing me a crazy side of himself. I got out of the car when he stopped it on the side of some quiet road. He yelled for me to come back, but I didn't. My mom came to pick me up. Mike sent me an apology text later that night that I didn't respond to. 2 nights later, I left my house to walk to Andrew's house. He lived only 2 blocks away. On my way there, I spotted someone across the street, not too far behind me, walking at about the same pace as me. They were wearing a hoodie. I couldn't see their face. Foot traffic on our block wasn't too common, but it also wasn't super weird either. The closer I got to Andrew's house, the closer the person got. As I continued up the street, I turned again and saw the person was now on the same side of the street as me. My heart started to race. I started walking faster. According to my phone, Andrew's house was coming up just on the right. I texted him to come outside, please, because I think I'm being followed. He replied, "Okay." I turned one more time as I heard the sound of shoes running on the sidewalk approaching from behind me, and I saw the guy in the black hoodie running at me. I screamed and ran as fast as I could for about 5 seconds, before seeing Andrew run to the front of his house in confusion. I turned around again and saw the guy in black running the opposite direction down the street. I keep saying the guy in black, but I know it was Mike. That guy had an identical height to him, from what I could tell. A few instances happened after that, like getting calls with no caller ID and seeing Mike's car parked outside my parents' house in the middle of the night. My parents were aware of what was going on, and one day my dad drove us over to Mike's house and knocked on the front door while I was in the car. He had a long, loud talk with Mike's parents. I lowered the windows to listen, and most notably, what my dad yelled was that he doesn't care how old Mike is, that it's still harassment. He said if Mike keeps trying to contact me in any way, we'd get the police involved. It worked. Mike stopped trying to contact me after that. My relationship with Mike was an early lesson in my life to watch out for red flags.